Just ahead on American Black Journal, we're going to talk about the movie Detroit and how it depicts a tragic chapter in the city's history. Also, a noted historian talks about Detroit 1967, then and now, plus efforts to create more minority entrepreneurs. American Black Journal starts right now.
American Black Journal is funded by the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, a partner with communities where children come first.
How does diversity bring energy to us all? At DTE Energy, we believe that it's the contributions of all that build great communities. As a company, we grow stronger by welcoming the unique perspectives of everyone. As community members, we support our state's broad culture and heritage. From working closely with women and minority-owned suppliers to embracing our local cultures, DTE Energy is powering diversity. The DTE Energy Foundation is a proud sponsor of Detroit Public Television. MASCO Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. MASCO and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929.
For Fun gave me a scholarship to help me attend Eastern Michigan University. I developed a passion for engineering at an early age. It started off with something as simple as fixing bikes. I didn't know anything about a bike shop or where I could go to get it fixed, so I just kind of had to play around with it myself. You can't really do everything on your own, so with even the smallest amount of help, just a little push, it can get you to where you need to be.
Welcome to American Black Journal. I'm Stephen Henderson. The much talked about movie Detroit has opened locally and it's generating a lot of conversation about race, police brutality, and of course inequality. The film focuses on the 1967 killings of 3 black teens at the Algiers Motel during the Detroit Rebellion. 3 white police officers were acquitted in their deaths. Joining me now to talk more about the movie is Charles Farrell from the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History and civil rights activist Reverend Dan Aldridge. Both of you, welcome to American Black Journal.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Charles, I'll start with you. Talk about where this movie fits in the narrative that we have been constructing now for almost a year and a half around this look back at 1967.
Absolutely. The Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History has really been focused on looking at rebellion at a large historical arc. We've created over 67 programs in order to be able to interpret and to understand what happened between July 23rd and July 28th. Mm-hmm. Obviously, one of the most significant aspects of the Detroit Rebellion, which was the largest to occur, of 384 rebellions in 298 cities from 67 to 68, was this assassination that occurred at the Algiers Motel of 3 teenagers, Carl Cooper, 17, we have Fred Temple, 18, and Aubrey Pollard, 19. So it's a very brutal murder that brings into focus the catalyst for mostly all these rebellions was police violence, police terrorism. So that's really at the center heart of the issue of looking at rebellions and the people's response to oppression.
Yeah. What about this movie? Does it tell the story the way it needs to be told?
Well, the movie actually used some creative artistic treatment, so it's not a documentary. It doesn't tell the story with accuracy, but it does bring to the fore the brutality, and you actually front and center with the brutality and the murders that occurred. So it brings into focus the racism that perpetuated African Americans' experience through the police. So that becomes very apparent, as well as the exoneration of these murderers, which really speaks to the current issues that's taking place today throughout the United States. So it can foster some dialogue and some corrective action that needs to take place in the country.
Yeah, in fact, the families never even receive so much as an apology from Detroit police for what happened. Reverend Aldridge, you were part of one of the few efforts, if any, to extract some justice from what happened. Talk about the tribunals that...
Well, I'm the primary organizer of the Algiers Tribunal, in which a community of people Many of us, Carolyn Keesh Kilpatrick was a part of it. Milton Henry, his brother Richard Henry, Kenny Cockrell, Ed Vaughn, Rosa Parks, John O. Killens, the novelist Frank Joyce. We were all a part, Justin Rabbits, of trying to construct a trial which actually dealt with the evidence. In the original trial, original preliminary examination, they never called any black jurors, any black witnesses. By the way, that's akin to the movie, in which in the movie, the primary person, the story is told from the point of view of one of the white prostitutes, who in the movie is not a prostitute. She was just two women in Ohio decided to come to Detroit because they wanted to hear some black music. They came just for the music. Anybody thinks that two white young women came to a transit motel
a little bit of a stretch
on Virginia. So that's really how they found their way there. So it's told. Excuse me. The other problem is that the movie is just brutal.
Yeah, let's talk about that depiction of these incidents. I mean, that's what I've heard a lot of people react
I call it a combination between a horror film, a war story, and an old-fashioned shoot-'em-up involving Hoop Gibson. It's so narrowly focused. All you focus on is just the beating. So you can sit there and just watch 2.5 hours of just watching people beating. As a black person, I tell people it was hard to see. Plus, my side kept losing. We didn't have any victory at all. We just kept losing for 2.5 hours. But so it doesn't tell. It could have been Detroit, but it could have been anywhere. So it really doesn't talk about Detroit.
It doesn't put it in that context.
No context.
Do you feel like there's a point to showing how brutal this is? I mean, given that most people, if you ask them, probably don't know that much about the Algiers Motel
That's
incident.
correct. That's correct.
Is there a purpose to showing it in this way that does shock the conscience and make you think differently about it?
Well, I think it's an important story that people do not know about, the Algiers Motel murders. We redefined it in terms of John Hershey's, the book that was published in 1968. He calls it an incident. Charles Wright had a program featuring Dan Aldridge, Lonnie Pete, who was both in the tribunal, and Danielle McGuire, who's writing a book. And we called our program the Algiers Motel Teenage Murders by Racist Police. So we could make it very clear. But again, in terms of what's going on in the country today, it puts on a very large screen the brutality and the racism of the police department, and then the injustice system that occurred with their exoneration. So, you know, from that extent, if it can foster some dialogue and start to make some corrective changes to what's taking place, then I think it's useful. It is a very challenging scene for someone who was beaten severely by the police at age 12 and a half by stress officers, which was an outgrowth from the '67 rebellion.
That was the reaction.
Yeah, that was a reaction with Nixon coming into power, both LBJ, Johnson, President Johnson, and Nixon both eliminating the Kerner Commission, which puts front and center the issues of structural racism. So the response was in Detroit to establish stress, which was the largest per capita killings anywhere in the country, over 22.
And that, of course, leads, the reaction to that is the election of Coleman Young.
That's correct.
As mayor of Detroit in 1973.
Absolutely.
Quickly before we have to end, talk about then versus now. Do you feel like the things that you guys did in response to Algiers made change that we see today?
Well, I think it presents a model. In fact, they're doing a major presentation on this in Japan. Japanese public television doing a major story, and in large part doing a major documentary on me and my role in this. It's not about focusing on me. It's focusing on the fact that there has to be a forum, there has to be some process. You cannot let police just wantonly kill people and nobody does anything. So what we did is point out the facts, and they're very difficult. I have a picture which some of you saw about the tribunal. The Free Press has all of that. The Free Press and the news have basically killed all their pictures. They had over 100 pictures. They have never shown any of it of the tribunal. Because I arranged with the Free Press through William Sarin to have that.
Bill Sarin,
Bill Sarin. So I made the specific arrangement. Bill Severin, I talked to him afterwards, he said the editors said to kill it.
Yeah.
And they wanted to make sure that no pictures of this were ever seen, both the news and the Free Press. And the only thing, the news printed nothing. The Free Press, Bill said, told them they could do 2 paragraphs of it.
Wow.
And we had over 3,000 people standing in the church and all the way across on the other side of Woodward. On the other side, I'm sorry, Linwood. Yeah. Yeah. So, but communities have to take more responsibility, I think, to challenge police. You cannot let police just wantonly kill people. For me, it's not the police. They're the persons who are in charge of the police. We always blame the police, but no one ever talks about who's in charge of the police.
Who they answer to.
Who they answer to.
Yeah. Okay, we could talk about this for 8 hours, but we're out of time. I want to thank both of you for being here, though.
My pleasure.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
All right, noted historian, author, and Detroit native Thomas Sugrue was in town last week to talk about the 1967 rebellion and the lessons that were learned. Detroit Journalism Cooperative member Keith Owens spoke with Sugrue about his book on race and inequality in Detroit.
One of the most eye-opening moments that I had in doing research for my book on Detroit was reading the papers of the NAACP, the leading civil rights organization in the city. They had several boxes of complaints sent by ordinary African Americans in Detroit in the 40s, especially the 50s and early 1960s, about harassment they had faced by the police. African American women walking to church in their Sunday finest, being catcalled and called the N-word by white police officers driving by. African American men who were walking or riding a bicycle or riding a car through an all-white neighborhood would almost always be stopped. And being stopped didn't just mean, please show me your license. It meant get out of the car, being thrown against the wall, often being beaten for being the wrong color in the wrong place at the wrong time. So you had those resentments built up to '67, but you also had a long history of struggle in Detroit on the shop floors to end discrimination in the workplace, in the neighborhoods to improve the conditions of housing, and in the schools, and against the police. Challenging discriminatory practices by shopkeepers. Detroit was a bastion of activism, but those cries were often not heard or listened to or heeded by the city's white leadership.
Mayor Kavanaugh at the time, considered basically a fairly decent mayor, but surely he would have, how would he not see this when everybody knew this kind of discrimination was happening?
Well, Kavanaugh, was elected in part because of Black Detroiters' anger at the previous mayor, and especially his crackdown on quote, lawlessness and the really aggressive policing that he instituted. And more so than almost all big city mayors at the time, Kavanaugh was really committed to civil rights. But there were limitations, right? I mean, Kavanaugh and his people, as well-intentioned as they were, I don't think fully had their ear to the ground. And look, Detroit was doing pretty well economically in the 1960s. The administration was getting a lot of money from Lyndon Johnson and the War on Poverty and from model cities to try to improve conditions in Detroit. And I think they believed that those would be enough, right? Not recognizing that there were so many unaddressed issues just beneath the surface.
Police Chief Craig says there's no way it could happen. He doesn't think it could happen again. A lot of police, others, I've heard many others say it could happen again. Some of the same things are in place now that we're then, and some things have actually gotten worse. What are your views on that? What do you think?
I think we have to celebrate the progress that happened, but realize that there are a lot of areas where things have stayed the same or gotten worse. Detroit is still, as it was in the 1960s, affected by exploitation, predation, right? The predation most recently in the form of predatory lending that led to foreclosures and the taking away of home and property from many residents of the city. The complete neglect of some of the most pressing problems, whether it be the city's infrastructure or especially its public education. And so and of course the enormous rise in incarceration, which has been devastating to Detroit and many other cities. All of these mean that we still have a lot of overcoming to do, that we didn't solve the problem in 1964 or 1967, or even with the election of a first Black mayor or of an African-American president, right? There's so much that remains unaddressed. And 67 remains relevant as long as Detroit and its mostly African-American population remains the afterthought of American policymakers, politicians, and ordinary citizens.
Are you hopeful about Detroit's future?
I think we have to be both hopeful because Detroiters are so optimistic, but also pessimistic because some of the deep causes are only being superficially addressed, if at all. Dressing up downtown isn't going to solve the problems of most of the city's 139 square miles and most of the working class and poor residents of the city. And we need to think about them, their neighborhoods, and their lives as much as we think about, maybe more than we think about, stadiums, casinos, restaurants, and bars and coffee shops.
All right, up next, opening the doors to entrepreneurship. But first, here's an excerpt from the Detroit Historical Society's Detroit 67 Oral History Project.
A lot of things have changed, but what has not changed, which has hurt the city immensely, is that if you drive down the streets of the same areas where those fires took place, they're the vacant lots that are there where businesses used to be, where families shopped, where people worked. That is something that has been a lasting and vivid memory for those of us who were here. And it's a lesson for, I think, other cities and municipalities that if there is discrimination and if there is, and there is, I mean, racism is alive and well in the United States. If there's a way to talk through it and work through it, if you've got businesses like we have in the city of Detroit, or we have New Detroit, which still is in existence today and plays a very pivotal and important role. And you think about looking at the Detroit Regional Chamber, or you take a look at Detroit Renaissance, where now the business leaders of Michigan that come together between Grand Rapids and the western part of the state and used to be Detroit Renaissance, coming together, looking at what's in the best interest of the state and what's in the best interest of the city of Detroit. These are the kinds of things that if people come to the city of Detroit and come to the state of Michigan, they'll find what is in the best interest of their citizens and the way to change things.
My next guests are entrepreneurs who have taken on the mission of getting more African Americans and women interested in owning businesses. They are sharing their expertise in key roles at Wayne State University and at TechTown. I'd like to welcome David Tarver, founder of the Urban Entrepreneurship Initiative, and Marlon Williams, founder of Sisters Code. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks, Stephen.
Yeah. We talk about this subject a lot on this program, the idea of growing businesses, opportunity for businesses among African Americans, minorities, and women. Talk about how we're doing with that in the new Detroit.
Yeah, I think we're doing well in some areas, and
Yeah.
we have ways to improve in other areas. I kind of have a unique perspective on this because, you know, I grew up during the 60s.
Right.
We're talking about 67 now,
Yeah.
and I started a business in the aftermath of the civil rights movement with two buddies. Marlon was great last week and holding this Candid Conversations event. So I kind of went through that first wave of trying to start a business without all the supports that are out there today.
Yes.
So now if you compare what we went through, you know, in the early 80s to what's happening now, there's a lot more support out there. But I think also with what's happened to the school systems,
Yes.
with what's happening with access to university education, you know, the preparation side needs work.
Yeah, yeah.
And I would
Go
say
ahead,
it's a good segue, especially like for TechTown. You know, when TechTown brought me on, I'm their first diversity and inclusion entrepreneur in residence, which to me says a lot about the way we want to trend. And they brought me there to say, hey, how do we bridge this gap, racial gap in particular, and gender, in this technology entrepreneur space? So I can see us moving forward in there, because with diversity and inclusion, you have to be very intentional.
Especially in that space, I feel
Yes.
like. There is something about, I mean, some of it's history, I guess. Some of it's just money and access that really restricts that space, I think, in people in our minds, right?
Yeah.
African Americans and women, we believe that somehow it's not for us.
Sometimes we count ourselves out,
Yeah.
for sure. But you do have to have a place where you feel included.
Yeah.
So that's why that diversity is important, but diversity and inclusion have to work together. So when you walk into the doors of a tech town or any other place, do you feel included? Do you feel like this space is for you?
Yeah, yeah. And you making it feel like it is for you is harder than people think it is,
yes,
right?
it is.
There's very specific things that need to be done, right?
Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even when we talk about like our open office hours, you know, do you have open office hours that are 9 to 5? Right. When I know when I grew up back in the day, my mom and dad had 15 jobs, so they couldn't come. So maybe you do something where it's after hours. That's something that even it's a small nudge to say you too are included.
Yeah, yeah.
And growing up, you know, I got into electronics. I started an electronics manufacturing business. I got into it because my father had been in the service, and he came home with this interest in radio and TV and had all this stuff in the basement. He couldn't get a job in those days in the electronics industry.
Wow.
But because he had all that stuff at home, that enabled me to get a leg up. And then people were actively trying to diversify.
Sure.
You know, so we were in that first wave of blacks going to college, engineering school, and going into corporations. And so that was a great thing. Now I'm involved at Wayne State in pulling together the overall entrepreneurship and innovation program there. And it's an exciting thing because given where Wayne State is and given the student body at Wayne State, we can have an outsized impact on getting students into these fields and really
and sort of that's where you have to start, right? With young people just getting to college and thinking about what they want to do.
Definitely.
Making it clear that you don't have to just grow up and go get a job. You can start your own thing.
And then also, you know, we have such a number of companies in Detroit who are doing lots of different interesting things, and having students have proximity to that, get familiar with that before they even get into college, you know, so that they get a picture of what they want to do is a great thing. You know, growing up in Flint, we had General Motors there, right? I had a job at General Motors when I was in high school.
Right.
And so, you know, it's a great leg up. Yeah, yeah, I think so, Steve.
Can't really go do that anymore. Yeah. Talk more about Techtown and the work that you're doing there. I'm not sure everybody knows exactly what Techtown is and what it's up to.
Techtown is this amazing place. You know, I walked in the door and you can just see, you can feel the creativity and the energy. It's this co-working space, but it's more than just co-working space. We have a labs team and we have a SWAT city team or a blocks team. And just to sum it up quickly, this is the place you want to go if you have an entrepreneurial idea.
If you have an idea,
you just have an idea. And to segue into what you were saying about what I'm doing, diversity and inclusion is important, which means your idea could be a dud, it could be great, we don't care. The beautiful thing is that you have this idea. And and Techtown is the place where you can come, where someone will meet you where you are to talk through your idea. And if we can't help you, we aren't just going to leave you. We will refer you to other people in the ecosystem. They have
and that positive experience with that idea, even if it doesn't work out, could lead you to something else. Failure is part of success.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah,
exactly.
That's a whole other subject. But, you know,
it is.
I teach a class at University of Michigan in urban entrepreneurship, and I tell my students every semester, the best businesses, the idea seemed crazy at first. Right. The problem is the crazy ideas seem crazy at first too. So you got to go out there and try
to separate them. We've only got about a minute left. What's the one thing you hear from people who want to start businesses that's the biggest hurdle that they face today?
Yeah, you hear a lot about money.
Yeah, well, right.
And I know that was a challenge for us, but I think particularly in terms of African American entrepreneurs, we don't have that generational wealth, and we don't have the access to wealth, and so we have to be creative about how we
can't just go to your dad and say, hey,
but that's how most businesses start. You know, family and friends and other founders, and so if you don't have that network, it makes it tough.
What about?
I would say what I hear the most is not really about the money; it's just about the fear. Is the fear of getting started. So I tell people there's power in the first step. You may fail lots and lots of times, but sometimes you have to get out of your own way and just try. I've had a lot of businesses, and it took a while for me to get where I wanted to be. So it's just that fear of failure.
And now you're doing it. I mean, Sisters Club is one of the cool.
Yes,
cool
thank you.
Around. All right, thank you both for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, that's our program for today. Thanks for watching. For more information about today's guests, you can visit AmericanBlackJournal.org, and you can always connect with us on Facebook and on Twitter. We'll see you next time.
American Black Journal is funded by the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, a partner with communities where children come first.
How does diversity bring energy to us all? At DTE Energy, we believe that it's the contributions of all that build great communities. As a company, we grow stronger by welcoming the unique perspectives of everyone. As community members, we support our state's broad culture and heritage. From working closely with women and minority-owned suppliers to embracing our local cultures, DTE Energy is powering diversity. The DTE Energy Foundation is a proud sponsor of Detroit Public Television. MASCO Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. MASCO and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929.
For Fun gave me a scholarship to help me attend Eastern Michigan University. I developed a passion for engineering at an early age. It started off with something as simple as fixing bikes. I didn't know anything about a bike shop or where I could go to get it fixed, so I just kind of had to play around with it myself. You can't really do everything on your own, so with even the smallest amount of help, just a little push, it can get you to where you need to be.